The waiting room outside the Grand Council chamber hummed with a sound that made Ambassador Chen Wei's teeth ache. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, just alien. Everything here was alien. The walls shifted colors based on the emotional states of those nearby. The seats molded themselves to whatever body sat in them. Even the air tasted different, filtered through systems designed for a dozen different respiratory needs. Chun straightened her uniform and tried not to feel small. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Hayes fidgeted with his tablet, reviewing their presentation for the 100th time. On her other side, Colonel Sarah Okonkwo stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back, eyes scanning the room with practiced military awareness. "They've kept us waiting 3 hours," Marcus muttered. "They've been waiting 12,000 years for us to show up," Chun replied. "I think we can handle 3 hours." A door that hadn't been visible a moment before slid open. A being that resembled a mantis made of blue glass gestured with one delicate limb. Its voice came from a translator device that floated beside its head. "The council will see the human delegation now." Chun led her team into the chamber and immediately felt even smaller. The room stretched upward into darkness, with platforms at various heights holding the representatives of 73 galactic civilizations. Some platforms held single beings. Others held clusters of organisms that moved as one. A few platforms appeared empty until Chun noticed the shimmer of energy-based life forms hovering their dot at the center of the chamber. A column of light descended to illuminate a small platform. The 3 humans walked to it and stood in that spotlight while countless alien eyes studied them. "Humans of Earth," a voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere. "You stand before the Galactic Council, an assembly that has maintained peace and prosperity across this galaxy for 120 centuries. You claim to seek membership among us. Speak your purpose." Chun stepped forward. She'd prepared a speech, worked on it for months, refined every word. Now, standing here, those words felt hollow and borrowed. So she set her notes aside and spoke from her heart instead. "We're new to all this," she began, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "We know that. We discovered faster than light travel 3 years ago. We've had radio for barely more than a century. While you were building your civilizations among the stars, we were still trying to understand fire." A ripple of sound passed through the chamber. It might have been laughter. Chun couldn't tell. "We don't have much to offer," she continued. "Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Our science is still catching up to things you've understood for millennia. We haven't mapped our own solar system completely, let alone the galaxy. Then why are you here?" The voice sounded genuinely curious now, perhaps even amused. "Because we want to learn," Chun said. "We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to meet other forms of life, understand other ways of thinking, see what wonders exist beyond our small blue world. And maybe, in time, we can contribute something too. We're young, yes. Inexperienced, absolutely. But we're eager and we're willing to work hard." "What you describe is not membership," another voice said, this one sounding like wind chimes in a storm. "It is apprenticeship. We are not teachers seeking students. Every species here was young once," Chun replied. "Someone must have given you a chance. We're just asking for the same." Silence fell over the chamber. It stretched so long that Marcus shifted nervously beside her. Then the first voice spoke again. "You humans have spirit. We grant you that." "Very well. The council will vote." The chamber filled with sounds as alien voices spoke in languages Chun couldn't hope to understand. Lights flickered on various platforms. The translator device provided no help with this part. All she could do was wait. Finally, the first voice returned. "The council has decided. Humanity is granted provisional membership, pending review in 10 standard cycles. You will hold an observer seat with limited voting privileges. Welcome to the galactic community, humans of Earth. Relief flooded through Chun. She'd done it. Humanity had a foothold among the stars. The next 6 months passed in a blur of meetings, briefings, and diplomatic gatherings. Chun and her team worked tirelessly to establish Earth's place in galactic society. They learned quickly that their limited status meant exactly that. Humans could attend meetings, but rarely speak. They could observe votes, but not influence them. They were tolerated, sometimes barely, by species that had forgotten more about the universe than humanity had yet discovered. The Vex, crystalline beings of living silicon, treated humans with polite indifference, like gardeners might notice insects on a leaf. The Marillon, aquatic creatures who lived in mobile water spheres, seemed confused by human emotional displays and avoided them entirely. The Chorus, a hive mind species that communicated through harmonic resonance, simply couldn't understand why humans needed to discuss anything when shared consciousness was so much more efficient. But Chun noticed something during those endless meetings. While she sat in her observer seat, listening to debates about trade routes and resource allocation and territorial disputes, she realized that these ancient species, for all their advancement, had lost something along the way. They communicated in pure data. When the Vex wanted to explain a concept, they transmitted crystallized information patterns. When the Marillon negotiated trade terms, they exchanged mathematical formulas that covered every possible contingency. When the Chorus argued for a policy change, they shared direct emotional frequencies that conveyed their position without words. It was all very efficient, very precise, very cold. One evening, Chun attended a reception for new council members. She found herself in conversation with a young Vex named Crystallis, one of the few who seemed genuinely interested in humanity. "Your species confuses the council," Crystallis said, their crystalline form refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns. "You are less advanced than any other member, yet you seem content, happy, even." "Why?" Chun smiled. "Can I tell you a story?" "A story?" Crystallis tilted their angular head. "You mean a historical record?" "Sort of. Stories are how humans make sense of the world. They're how we teach, how we remember, how we connect with each other. We have data archives for teaching, memory crystals for remembering. What is connecting?" Chun thought for a moment. "There was once a human named Mandela," she began. "He lived on Earth during a dark time when people were divided by the color of their skin. He fought against this division and was imprisoned for it. He spent 27 years in a small cell. When he was finally freed, everyone expected him to seek revenge. Instead, he forgave. He worked to bring people together. He showed that healing is more powerful than hatred." Crystallis stood very still. "This is factual data about a historical individual." "No," Chun said gently. "It's a story about hope and forgiveness and the choice to build bridges instead of walls. The facts matter, but what really matters is what it means, what it makes you feel, what it teaches you about being better than your worst impulses." "Feel," Crystallis repeated. "The Vex do not prioritize emotional processing. Maybe that's something you're missing." Over the following weeks, Chun noticed something odd. Crystallis began attending human delegation meetings, sitting quietly in the back. Other young members of various species started doing the same. They listened when humans spoke to each other, confused by the tangents and metaphors and stories the humans couldn't seem to stop telling. Chun began to understand. Humanity had arrived late to the stars, and they had no great technology to offer. But they had something else. They had stories. They had empathy. They had the ability to make others feel things, understand things, care about things in ways that data alone could never accomplish. She didn't know it yet, but this strange human gift would change everything. The emergency session was called at dawn Galactic Standard Time. Chun arrived at the council chamber to find it in chaos. Representatives shouted across the space in a dozen languages. Translator devices sparked and whined, overwhelmed by the simultaneous outcry. Security drones hovered nervously near the ceiling, their sensors flickering between green and yellow alert status. "What's happening?" Chun asked a nearby aide, a spindly creature from Proxy Station. "The Krell," the aide chittered, their translator barely keeping up. "They've mobilized their fleet. 16,000 warships. They're demanding territorial concessions from 3 council worlds, or they'll take them by force." Chun's blood went cold. She'd heard of the Krell Dominion. Everyone had. They were the boogeyman of the Outer Rim, a militaristic empire that had been exiled to the galactic fringe 3,000 years ago for violating peace accords. They'd been quiet since then, building their strength in the darkness between stars. The council had thought them contained. Apparently, they'd been wrong. "Order!" The voice of the council speaker boomed through the chamber. "We must respond with unity. Military Coordinator Vex Prime, what are our defensive capabilities?" A massive crystalline being stepped forward, their form glowing with agitated light. "Our peacekeeping forces number 300 ceremonial vessels. We have not fought a major war in 6 millennia. We are unprepared." "Then we must negotiate," someone called out. "We tried," another voice responded. The Krell refused to meet. They've stated their demands. They want the Helios Cluster, the Draven Nebula mining rights, and formal recognition as a sovereign power with veto authority in the Council. "Those demands are unacceptable," the speaker declared. "If we grant them, we legitimize aggression. Other species will see that threats and force work better than diplomacy. If we refuse, 3 worlds will burn," someone else argued. The debate raged for hours. Chun sat in her observer seat, watching the greatest minds in the galaxy struggle with a problem they hadn't faced in generations. They proposed sanctions. They discussed defensive positions. They debated whether their ancient defense pacts even meant anything anymore. But no one proposed actually talking to the Krell. Not really. They'd sent formal communications, delivered diplomatic notes, transmitted standard negotiation protocols. But those were just data exchanges. No one had tried to understand why the Krell were doing this. During a brief recess, Chun found herself in a side chamber with Marcus and Sarah. "This is insane," Marcus said, pacing. "They're going to let millions die because they can't figure out how to fight, and they're too proud to surrender." "They've forgotten how to deal with conflict," Sarah observed. 6,000 years of peace made them soft. Not weak, just unprepared for anyone who doesn't play by their rules. Chum stared out the window at the alien city below, its towers reaching toward a purple sky. An idea was forming, dangerous and probably foolish. "What if we offered to negotiate?" she said quietly. Both Marcus and Sarah turned to stare at her. "We have no authority," Marcus said. "We have no military," Sarah added. "Exactly," Chun replied. "We have nothing to lose. The Council has tried their formal protocols. They've communicated the way they always communicate, with data and logic and reason. But the Krell aren't responding to that. What makes you think they'd respond to us?" Sarah asked. "Because we're human. Because we understand something these advanced species have forgotten. Conflict isn't just about resources and territories. It's about emotions, pride, resentment, the need to be heard." Marcus shook his head. "The Council will never agree to it. They might if they're desperate enough." Chun requested an audience with the Council speaker during the next recess. To her surprise, she was granted one. She found the speaker, an ancient Merlon named Tidecler, floating in their water sphere, tendrils of bioluminescence pulsing with stress. "Ambassador Chun, These are difficult times for social calls. I'm not here socially. I'm here to offer humanity's help. The bioluminescence flickered with what might have been amusement. Your species has been members for mere months. You have no military capability. What help could you possibly provide? Let me talk to the Krull. The light patterns went still. Explain. Chun took a deep breath. The Council has tried formal diplomacy. You've sent messages, outlined consequences, explained why their demands are unacceptable. But you haven't actually talked to them. You haven't asked them why they're doing this. We know why. They want territory and power. That's what they're demanding, but it might not be what they actually need. Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other. We've had countless wars, endless conflicts. And we learned something important. Most fights aren't really about what people say they're fighting about. They're about deeper things: respect, recognition, old wounds that never healed. You're suggesting the Krell are emotional actors rather than rational ones. I'm suggesting they're both. Just like everyone else. Your formal protocols work perfectly when everyone's being reasonable. But when someone's hurt or angry or feeling ignored, logic alone won't reach them. Tydekler's tendrils swirled in thought. If you fail, the situation will be no worse than it already is. If you succeed, the Marillon paused. Very well. I will bring it to the Council. But, Ambassador, understand this. If you go alone. We cannot appear to endorse your approach. If you fail, humanity will bear the responsibility. I understand. 3 hours later, Chum found herself aboard a human shuttle, traveling toward the Krell flagship. The Council had voted, barely, to allow her attempt. Most expected her to fail. Some probably hoped she would. Humans needed to learn their place. The Krell flagship was a monster of dark metal and aggressive angles. It bristled with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. As Chun's shuttle docked, she felt the weight of what she was doing. If this went wrong, she wouldn't just doom herself. She might doom Earth's entire relationship with the galactic community. The docking bay was dark and hot. 2 Krell warriors met her, towering figures in armor that looked like it had been forged from volcanic rock. They didn't speak, just gestured for her to follow. Through corridors lit by red emergency lights, past crews that stopped to stare at the small human, Chun walked. Finally, they reached a command deck where a massive Krell sat on a throne of black metal. I am Supreme Commander Vraxt, the Krell said, his voice like grinding stones. You are the human they sent to beg. I'm Ambassador Chun, she replied, meeting his gaze. I'm not here to beg. I'm here to listen. Vraxt's eyes narrowed. Listen? The Council has told you why they can't accept your demands. But no one has asked you why you're making them. So I'm asking. Why are you doing this, Commander Vraxt? For a long moment, the Krell commander said nothing. Then he laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. You're either very brave or very foolish, human. Probably both. But I'm still asking. Will you tell me your story? Vraxt studied her. Then, slowly, he gestured to a seat beside his throne. Sit, he commanded. And I will tell you of the Krell. I will tell you of betrayal and exile and 3,000 years of shame. I will tell you why we no longer beg for what is ours by right. Chun sat. And she listened. For 12 hours, Vraxt spoke. He told of how the Krell had once been council members, how they'd been blamed for a war they didn't start, how they'd been exiled without trial or mercy. He spoke of generations growing up in the darkness, told they were monsters, treated like threats instead of people. Chun didn't argue, didn't try to correct his history or point out inconsistencies. She just listened, asked questions, and showed him that someone finally cared about the Krell side of the story. When Vrax finally finished, His voice was rough with emotion he'd been holding back for hours. "And now you've heard," he said. "What will you do with this knowledge?" "Help you get what you actually need," Chun replied. "Not territory or mining rights, but something better. Justice, recognition, the acknowledgement that what happened to your people was wrong. The Council will never admit fault. They will if we ask them the right way." Chun stood before the Galactic Council once again, but this time she wasn't alone. Supreme Commander Vraxt stood beside her, towering over her small frame, his presence sending ripples of shock through the assembled species. Security drones hummed closer, weapon systems warming up. "Stand down," the Council speaker commanded the drones. "Ambassador Chun returns under diplomatic immunity, though we are surprised by her companion." "Thank you, Speaker Tidicler," Chun said. "Commander Vraxt has agreed to a temporary ceasefire. His fleet will not advance, but he's asked to address the Council, and I've promised him that you'll listen." "The Krell have no voice in this chamber," someone shouted. "They were expelled 3,000 years ago," Chun replied, "by people who are long dead for crimes that might not have been committed. I've spent 12 hours listening to Commander Vraxt's story. I'm asking you to give him just 10 minutes of yours." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species demanded Vraxt be removed immediately. Others, particularly some of the younger delegates Chun had befriended over the past months, called for calm. Finally, the speaker raised their tendrils for silence. "The Krell may speak. 10 minutes, then we will deliberate." Vraxt stepped forward. Without his armor, standing in simple robes Chun had convinced him to wear, he looked less like a warlord and more like an old soldier carrying too many battles. "I will not apologize for threatening war," Vraxt began, his voice steady. "I am not sorry. The Krell have lived for 3,000 years in exile. We were cast out for a crime we did not commit, a war we did not start. No trial, no investigation, just judgment and exile. The historical records clearly show someone began." But the speaker silenced them. "Continue." "Commander, your historical records," Vraxt said, "were written by the victors. My people were convenient scapegoats for a war that suited council politics at the time. We were new members, like the humans. We had no powerful allies. When accusations were made, no one defended us." He paused, and Chun could see the emotion working through him. "My grandmother's grandmother was a child when the exile happened. She told stories to her children of the Krell homeworld, a forest that sang in the wind and oceans that glowed with life. None of us have ever seen it. That world was given to another species. We were pushed to the rim, told to be grateful we were allowed to live at all. 3,000 years, Vraxt continued. That's how long we've waited for someone to care, to listen, to acknowledge that maybe, possibly, an injustice occurred. But the Council is too ancient, too proud, too comfortable to admit error. So yes, I mobilized our fleet. Yes, I made demands. Because apparently, that's the only language you understand." The chamber was silent now. Ambassador Chun asked me what we really want. Not territory, not resources. We want what was stolen from us. Our dignity, our place among the stars. We want the Council to admit they might have been wrong. We want a real investigation into what happened 3 millennia ago. And we want the chance to rejoin you, not as exiles begging for scraps, but as equals. Vraxt stepped back. Chun stepped forward. "The Council faces a choice," she said. "You can refuse these requests and go to war. Thousands will die. Worlds will burn. And even if you win, you'll prove that the Krell were right to use force. That it's the only thing that works. Or you can do something radical. You can admit that 3,000 years ago, in a galaxy very different from today, mistakes might have been made. You can open a formal investigation. You can show that the Council values truth more than pride. Why should we believe the Crow will accept this? A voice called out. Because I give you my word, Rax said. Open the investigation. Grant it real authority. If it finds my people guilty, we will accept that judgment. But if it finds we were wronged, you will restore our homeworld and grant us full membership in the Council. Not provisional, full, equal. The debate that followed lasted 14 hours. Chun sat with Rax in a waiting chamber, watching him pace like a caged animal. They'll refuse, he said. They always refuse. They might surprise you. Humans are naive. Humans are hopeful. There's a difference. When they were finally called back, the chamber felt different, calmer. The speaker floated forward. The Council has voted. The investigation will proceed. It will be led by a tribunal of 3 species who were not members at the time of the original incident. They will have access to all archives, all records, all testimony. Their findings will be binding. Rax's hands clenched. And if they find for us, then the Council will issue a formal apology. Your homeworld will be restored to Krell control, with reparations paid to the species currently residing there for their relocation. And the Krell Dominion will be offered full membership in this Council. I want it in writing, Rax said. It already is. The speaker transmitted a document to both Rax and Chun. We may be old, Commander, but we are not without honor. We simply needed to be reminded that honor requires action, not just words. Over the next 6 months, the investigation proceeded. Chun watched as 3,000 years of history was excavated, examined, and debated. The humans, with their gift for narrative, helped piece together a story from fragments of data that the other species had treated as separate, unconnected facts. The truth, when it emerged, was complicated. The Krell hadn't started the ancient war, but they participated in it. They'd been manipulated by a more powerful species that had since gone extinct, used as pawns in a larger conflict. They weren't innocent victims, but they weren't guilty of the crimes they'd been accused of either. The tribunal's final report acknowledged this complexity. Yes, the Krell bore some responsibility, but the collective punishment of permanent exile was disproportionate and unjust. The day the Council formally apologized was historic. Rax stood in the same spot where he delivered his speech. And this time, tears ran down his scarred face as Speaker Tidekla spoke words of regret and reconciliation. But something even more significant was happening in the wider galaxy. Word of what the humans had done spread quickly. Here was a species, barely a year into Council membership, that had prevented a war without firing a shot. They'd done it not with superior technology or military might, but with something much simpler. They'd listened. They'd cared. They'd helped others understand each other. Within months, Chun's schedule was filled with requests. Could humans mediate a trade dispute between the Vex and the Chorus? Could they help resolve a territorial argument that had been deadlocked for 60 years? Could they facilitate conversations between species that had stopped talking to each other centuries ago? Humanity discovered its calling among the stars. They became the galaxy's mediators, the ones called in when logic and data weren't enough. They taught other species their methods. How to listen actively. How to validate feelings without necessarily agreeing with them. How to find the story underneath the conflict. The Council created a new department, the Office of Cultural Understanding, and placed humans at its head. They established training programs where young members of various species could learn these human skills: empathy, storytelling, emotional intelligence, chrysalis. The young Vex who'd first shown interest in human stories became one of the program's first graduates. They started teaching other Vex the value of emotional processing, something their species had dismissed as primitive for millennia. You changed us, Crystallis told Chun one day, their crystalline form glowing with what Chun had learned to recognize as contentment. Not just the council. Not just galactic politics. You changed how we think about consciousness itself. We believed intelligence meant transcending emotion. You showed us that true intelligence means embracing it. 2 years after Chun's first appearance before the council, she received a summons to a private meeting with Speaker Tydekler. She arrived to find not just the speaker, but the leaders of the council's 5 founding species. Ambassador Chun, Tydekler began, we have a proposal for you. The position of council mediator has existed in theory for 4,000 years, but it has been empty for the last 2,000. We believed it was obsolete. We were wrong. The council wishes to offer you this position. Chun's heart raced. What would that mean? It would mean you'd be responsible for resolving conflicts throughout council space. You'd have the authority to intervene in disputes, to call emergency sessions, to bring parties together for negotiation. You'd report only to the full council, and your decisions in matters of cultural conflict would be binding. I'm honored, but I'm just one person. We know, Tydekler said. That's why the proposal includes expanding the Office of Cultural Understanding into a full department with representatives from every member species. You'd lead them, train them, help us all become better at understanding each other. And the humans? Chun asked. What happens to Earth's status? That's the other matter we wish to discuss. The Vex elders stepped forward, their ancient form casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Humanity's provisional membership is ended. The Council votes to grant Earth full membership with all rights and privileges. Furthermore, humans will be given permanent seats on 15 key committees, including security, trade, and cultural affairs. Chun felt tears forming. Just 2 years ago, they'd been the newest, least powerful members. Why? She asked. Why give us so much so quickly? Because you taught us something we'd forgotten, the elder said. Power isn't just about technology or longevity or knowledge. It's about connection. It's about understanding. It's about making others feel heard and valued. In these things, humanity exceeds us all. 50 years passed like water through fingers. Chun, now in her 90s, walked slowly through the council gardens, a place that hadn't existed when she'd first arrived. Gardens required understanding that different species found different environments beautiful, required compromise and creativity to build spaces where crystalline beings and water dwellers and oxygen breathers could all find peace. It had been one of humanity's first major projects after gaining full membership. Marcus walked beside her, his hair now white, his steps measured by age. Sarah had passed 5 years ago, but her legacy lived on in the Council's reformed security forces, which now trained in conflict resolution alongside combat readiness. Do you ever miss it? Marcus asked. The early days, when we were nobody? Chun smiled. Sometimes. It was simpler then. Now there are 200 species in the Council, and they all want human mediators for their problems. Because we're good at it. Because we're human. We still feel things deeply, even after all this time among the stars. The other species, they're learning, but emotion isn't natural to many of them. They have to practice it like we practice mathematics. They reached a memorial garden dedicated to the Crow restoration, where a statue of Rax stood facing one of Chun herself. The old commander had died 10 years ago, peacefully on his restored homeworld, surrounded by grandchildren who would never know exile. He changed everything, Chun said, touching the base of his statue. When he showed up with his fleet, ready for war, and left with a handshake and a promise. That moment taught the galaxy that there's always another way. You taught the galaxy that he just gave you the chance. A young human approached, no more than 30, wearing the insignia of a cultural understanding officer. Chun recognized her as Lieutenant Amara Singh, one of the newest generation of human mediators. Ambassador Chun, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation developing in the Outer Reach. The Tharlan Collective and the Whisper Syndicate are in dispute over mining rights to an asteroid cluster. Both sides have requested human mediation. Chun sighed. Tell them I'll review the case files and appoint a mediator by tomorrow. Actually, ma'am, they both specifically requested you. I'm 93 years old, Lieutenant. I've earned my retirement. With respect, Ambassador, you're also Chen Wei. Your name means something out there. Sometimes just your presence can prevent conflicts from escalating. Marcus chuckled. She's got you there. Chen looked at the young officer, saw the hope and idealism in her eyes, and remembered her own first days on the council. So young, so naive, thinking stories and empathy could change the galaxy. The impossible thing was that it had worked. All right, Chun said, but you're coming with me. It's time you learned how to handle these situations yourself. I won't be around forever. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. As they walked toward the council building, Chun noticed how different everything looked from 5 decades ago. The chambers had been redesigned with input from humans, creating spaces that felt warmer, more welcoming. Common areas existed now where delegates could share meals, something unheard of before humanity. Every species had started adopting human customs in small ways. The Vex had begun decorating their ships with art. The Marilon had created poetry in their musical language. Even the Chorus had started telling stories about their shared consciousness, narratives that helped others understand their experience. The galaxy hadn't just accepted humans. It had been reshaped by them. The next morning, Chun and Lieutenant Singh boarded a transport to the Outer Reach. The journey took 3 days, and Chun spent them teaching the young officer the lessons she'd learned over 50 years. Mediation isn't about finding compromise, Chun explained as they reviewed the case files. It's about finding truth. These two groups, the Tharlan and the Whispers, they both claim the asteroids. But what are they really fighting about? Singh studied the files. The Tharlan were there first, but they abandoned the cluster 200 years ago. The Whispers have been mining it for the last century. The Tharlan want to return now that they've discovered rare minerals there. That's the surface. What's underneath? Singh frowned, thinking. The Tharlan abandoned the cluster because of a plague that devastated their population. They're finally recovering, growing again, and they need resources for expansion. The Whispers are a nomadic species who've been pushed out of system after system by larger civilizations. That asteroid cluster is the first place they've been able to call home. Now you're seeing it, Chun said. This isn't about mining rights. It's about survival and dignity. The Tharlan need to prove they're strong enough to reclaim what was theirs. The Whispers need to prove they have a right to exist somewhere. So how do we solve it? We listen to them tell us their stories. We help them hear each other. And then we find a solution that addresses what they actually need, not just what they think they're fighting about. The negotiations took 2 weeks. At first, both sides came in defensive and angry, ready for a fight. But Chun did what she'd always done. She asked them to talk about themselves. She asked about the Tharlan plague, about the pain of losing half their population, about the desperate hope of rebuilding. She asked the Whispers about their long exile, about always being the outsiders, about the dream of finally having a place to call home. Lieutenant Singh watched and learned. She saw how Chun never rushed, never pushed for quick solutions. She saw how the ambassador validated feelings, even when they seemed irrational. She saw how, slowly, the two sides started looking at each other differently by the end of the first week. The Tharlan and Whisper negotiators were eating meals together, sharing stories about their worlds and cultures. By the end of the second week, they drafted an agreement themselves, one that Chun only had to refine around the edges. The asteroid cluster would be jointly administered. The Tharlan would get priority mining rights to the rare minerals they needed for reconstruction. The Whispers would get permanent settlement rights and a share of the profits. Both species would contribute to building a new station in the cluster, one that could serve as a cultural center for the entire outer reach. How did you know that would work? Singh asked as they prepared to return to Council space. I didn't, Chun admitted. But I knew that if they could see each other as people instead of obstacles, they'd find a way forward. That's what humans do. We see the person behind the problem. Back on the Council homeworld, Chun attended what would be her final full Council session. A special ceremony had been called to mark the 50th anniversary of humanity's first mediator mission with the Krull. The chamber was full. Every species represented, many by people who hadn't even been born when Chun first walked into this room. Speaker Tydeckler, now ancient even by Marilon standards, floated forward. 50 years ago, Tydeckler began. The Galactic Council faced a crisis that threatened to destroy the peace we've maintained for millennia. We were paralyzed by our own success, unable to deal with conflict because we'd forgotten how. Then a young human stood before us and offered something we didn't know we needed. Not weapons, not technology, not even wisdom, though that came later. She offered us the simple gift of listening. Ambassador Chen Wei changed this galaxy. Not through conquest or domination, but through compassion and understanding. She showed us that the most powerful force in the universe isn't energy or matter or even intelligence. It's empathy. It's the ability to make others feel seen and heard and valued. Today, every species in this council has human-trained mediators on their staff. Our conflicts are resolved in weeks instead of decades. Our differences are celebrated instead of feared. We have become not just a council of species, but a true galactic community. And we owe this transformation to humanity. Tydeckler paused, their bioluminescence pulsing with emotion. Ambassador Chun, on behalf of the 117,000 trillion souls who call this galaxy home, we thank you. We honor you. And we ask you to accept the title of Galactic Elder, the highest honor this council can bestow. The chamber erupted in applause, each species expressing approval in their own way. The Vex glowed brilliant white. The Marilon spheres vibrated with harmonic frequencies. The chorus sang in perfect unity. And the humans, scattered throughout the chamber, wept with pride. Chun stood slowly, feeling every one of her 93 years, and walked to the center platform. She looked around at the faces, the beings, the representatives of civilizations that span the galaxy. So different, all of them, yet all capable of understanding each other if they tried. I accept this honor, Chun said, her voice steady despite her age. But I accept it not for myself, but for all of humanity. We were late to the stars. We arrived with nothing to offer but ourselves. And somehow, that was enough. We didn't conquer this galaxy. We didn't even try. We simply showed you who we are. Emotional, storytelling creatures who can't help but see the person behind every face, the heart behind every conflict, the hope behind every fear. 50 years ago, I stood here as an observer, powerless and small. Today, humans serve on every council committee. We mediate conflicts across 100,000 light years. We train your children in empathy and understanding. We've helped reshape galactic society without firing a single shot. How did we do it? Not through superiority or strategy. We did it by being human, by caring when it wasn't convenient, by listening when it wasn't easy, by believing that every being in this galaxy has a story worth hearing. Chun's voice grew stronger, filled with the passion that had never left her despite the decades. This is humanity's gift to the stars, not technology or weapons or knowledge, but the simple, powerful recognition that we're all in this together. That understanding is stronger than force. That compassion is more powerful than conquest. That the best way to rule is not to rule at all, but to serve. We were late to the stars, but maybe we arrived exactly when you needed us. The applause that followed shook the chamber, and in that moment, surrounded by species from across the galaxy, all united in acknowledgement of what humanity had accomplished. Chun understood that Earth's children had finally found their place among the stars, not as conquerors or subjects, but as the bridge builders, the mediators, the ones who taught the galaxy how to be a family.